Aelin the dragon paced restlessly through the vast library, her movements sharp and uneasy. Tension clung to her every step as regret weighed heavily on her mind. The more she replayed her decision, the clearer it became sending Sejin to the 67th floor had been a terrible mistake. No matter how she tried to rationalize it, doubt gnawed at her. A tower farmer facing that floor's locust infestation alone, how long could anyone survive? Especially now, when the creatures were growing more lethal by the second. Without warning, the crystal orb beside her flared with an ominous red glow. A system prompt appeared, asking whether Dragon Lady Aelin wished to remove a communication block. She hesitated only briefly before selecting yes. The image that formed made her sigh instantly. It was her grandfather, Kaiser. The moment he appeared, he dropped all dignity and began apologizing profusely, bowing repeatedly and begging for forgiveness. He admitted his fault over and over, pleading with her not to block him ever again. Aelin barely reacted. Her thoughts were still tangled in worry. The scene replayed in her mind Sejin descending to the 67th floor as a mid-level manager, tasked with suppressing the Locust disaster. Whether he would survive at all remained uncertain, and despite being a tower administrator, Aelin was powerless to intervene. That helplessness hurt more than anything. Kaiser noticed her expression and felt a pang of disappointment. Even he couldn't help her right now. Then, suddenly, realization struck him. "TCH, why are you worrying?" Kaiser said firmly. "That boy isn't ordinary." He reminded her who Sejin truly was, the greatest solo farmer the tower had ever produced. Someone who had entered the Black Tower alone and survived the 99th floor with nothing but his bare hands. An achievement that even dragons acknowledged as extraordinary. Sejin had influenced countless beings, turning strangers into allies, accelerating his growth in ways no one else could replicate. And above all else, he was the chosen representative of the Black Dragon. Chosen by Aelin herself. "So tell me," Kaiser continued, smiling knowingly, "how could you doubt your own judgment?" The scene shifted. Sejin calmly chewed on detoxifying green onions as Theo launched himself at waves of purple locusts, gnawing on green onions mid-attack. Despite the chaos, their teamwork was seamless. Kaiser's voice echoed in Aelin's thoughts. Sejin would be fine. He was unmatched. We watched Sejin tear through enemies using his dagger and scythe, clearing everything in his path with ruthless efficiency. Nearby, Theo paused for a moment, suddenly realizing something. What would Sejin have done if he hadn't packed extra detoxifying green onions? Sejin simply smiled, gave Theo a confident thumbs up, and praised him for his quick thinking. At the same time, the Rabbit Princess stood firm, weaving defensive magic to shield her allies while deflecting incoming locusts. She knew red locusts were already dangerous, but purple ones were far worse. Their appearance meant the infestation had reached a terrifying new level. Calling upon her water affinity, she unleashed a powerful water cannon, blasting the locusts out of the air. A system notification appeared. Guardian Princess and Guardian Theo had defeated a purple locust. Sejin received 50% of the earned experience. Sejin steadied his breathing, his panic fading. Instead, excitement crept in. This wasn't just a crisis, it was an opportunity. Baby Bear, no longer small, returned to his towering form, gripping his massive wooden weapon as he crushed purple locusts with overwhelming force. Sejin even hurled his axe like a thunder god, calling it back effortlessly. Then, suddenly, a purple locust lunged at Sejin from behind. Theo's heart nearly stopped, but Sejin didn't flinch. Flames erupted around him. The flame of companionship surged forth, wrapping his body in blazing armor. The locusts disintegrated the moment they touched him. Sejin smiled calmly. "I'm fine." Theo and the Rabbit Princess stared in shock. Sejin explained that before descending to the 67th floor, the flame had granted him both protection and companionship. He wasn't the weakest anymore, not even close. Baby Bear cheered proudly, calling Sejin his dad with pure admiration. Even the Rabbit Princess couldn't help but think if the Black Dragon had existed back in the Red Ribbon Kingdom, everything might have turned out differently. But Sejin's expression soon hardened. "No matter what," he said, scanning the battlefield, "there are still too many of them." A massive swarm engulfed a tower-like structure nearby, dissolving it in seconds. The battle continued relentlessly. Fatigue crept in. Theo noticed their supplies thinning. Even the strongest warrior rabbit began to slow. Sejin clenched his jaw. Baby Bear was barely holding on, relying purely on raw strength. If only the Minotaurs were here. If only Iona were present, and then it clicked. Sejin's eyes lit up. "I can bring her here." Without hesitation, Sejin pulled out the interdimensional key he had acquired after saving Bat-Bat. Purple locusts surged toward him from every direction, but he didn't retreat. Instead, he activated the key. Space twisted violently as a dimensional gate burst open. Sejin slammed his fist against the glowing barrier and shouted urgently, calling for Iona to open the door. On the other side, the hamster wizard froze in shock. She rushed forward, flinging the gate open with a panicked expression, completely unprepared for what she saw. At first, she assumed Sejin had come to check on the upgrade, she muttered nervously, explaining that the room was almost finished. But then she noticed the air. It was thick, toxic, suffocating. Before Sejin could explain, Iona's sharp eyes caught sight of the forest beyond the gate completely overrun. Purple locusts swarmed everywhere, and a massive structure nearby had already been eaten away to nothing. Then the locusts noticed her. Their attention shifted instantly. But Iona didn't step back. Her playful demeanor vanished, replaced by cold focus. Gripping her staff tightly, she began channeling energy. Purple lightning crackled violently along its surface. The magic surged higher and higher. And then she released it. Giga lightning. The sky exploded into brilliant purple light. Bolts rained down like divine punishment, obliterating countless locusts in midair. They burst apart like fireworks, scattering ash and sparks across the battlefield. Even Sejin stood frozen in disbelief. Baby Bear cheered wildly, jumping up and down as the others stared in awe. The Rabbit Princess smiled warmly, while the warrior rabbit silently observed, deeply impressed. Theo, unlike any ordinary cat, was utterly mesmerized. As Iona descended slowly from the sky, lightning still tearing through the swarm, system notifications flooded in. The system had updated. Sejin's role as a mid-level manager was confirmed. His mission was now clear: eradicate the purple locusts infesting the 67th floor. Out of 700 million locusts, 50,000 had already been eliminated. Rewards: 3 million experience points, 50,000 tower coins. Failure condition: Sejin would be unable to return until the quest was completed. Sejin swallowed hard. Not because of the rewards, but because 699,950,000 locusts remained. Baby Bear shrank back to his smaller form. Everyone stared silently at the floating system window, unsure how to react. Iona broke the silence, reassuring them that once the locust population dropped further, the purple variants would revert to red, becoming far easier to deal with. But the toxic air finally caught up to her. Her face paled, her knees buckled. Before she could collapse, Theo lunged forward and caught her gently, laying her down near the dimensional gate. He urged her to eat a detoxifying green onion immediately. Under the influence of the poison-induced hallucination, Theo appeared impossibly heroic in Iona's eyes. She praised his magnificent magic and expressed relief that they were allies. As she nibbled on the green onion like a tiny hamster, her face flushed bright red. Nearby, the warrior rabbit scanned the area carefully before reporting that no locusts were currently nearby. Relief washed over Sejin. They needed rest. Sejin suggested retreating into the dimensional space he had unlocked. Inside the space, the atmosphere changed completely. The Rabbit Princess, Warrior Rabbit, and Baby Bear stepped in first, their eyes widening in amazement. When Sejin entered with Theo and Iona, even he was stunned. The space had transformed into something warm, cozy, and festive, decorated like a perfect winter holiday retreat. Sejin complimented Iona's work. She smirked proudly. "This level of interior magic is trivial for me." That's when Sejin had another realization. If he made this dimensional space permanent, he could summon allies freely without needing to designate them as subordinates. It was revolutionary. As laughter filled the room, Sejin noticed Baby Bear chewing on something suspicious. When asked, Baby Bear name is Quang proudly held up a piece of meat. Apparently, the lightning-struck purple locusts were delicious. Everyone else recoiled. The smell was awful at first, even making Theo grimace. But as the stench faded, something familiar emerged. It smelled like chicken. Sejin suddenly remembered an old saying from Earth. Locusts taste like chicken. Without hesitation, Sejin bowed deeply to Iona and asked if she could modify the small brazier. Outside, the environment remained toxic and hostile. Inside the dimensional space, however, a mouth-watering aroma filled the air. The brazier had been transformed into a roaster. Purple locust meat skewers rotated slowly over the flame, juices dripping as they cooked to perfection. Quang watched with sparkling eyes. A system notification appeared. Achievement unlocked. First to cook roasted purple locust in the tower. Registered under cooking level 4. Proficiency increased slightly. As the roasting continued, additional system effects activated. Stuffing purple locusts with detoxifying green onions and roasting them over indirect heat produced lean, savory meat. The toxins were neutralized, granting low-level poison resistance to anyone who ate it. Dish rating, C+. Sejin lifted a skewer and stared in disbelief at its size. He encouraged everyone to try it. Theo hesitated. It still looked unsettling. Quang didn't care. He grabbed the entire skewer, ignoring Sejin's warning about the heat, tossed it into the air to cool it down, and cracked the shell open. Inside was soft, steaming meat. One bite. His eyes lit up. The flavor melted in his mouth, and he devoured it at terrifying speed. Theo stared, horrified, and then started drooling. Soon the others followed. Sejin handed out skewers generously, telling everyone to eat slowly and ask for more. When Sejin finally took a bite himself, bliss flooded his senses. After a year without proper food, it tasted exactly like roasted chicken from home. As the group feasted happily, unaware, the delicious aroma drifted beyond the dimensional gate. Outside, 3 strange monsters with yellow, blue, and red eyes gathered near the entrance. They believed what was happening inside was completely unforgivable. Deep inside the dimensional space, peace settled in at last. Every creature lay piled together in comfortable exhaustion, fast asleep after the feast. Quang snored softly beneath a mountain of blankets. The Rabbit Princess rested beside the Warrior Rabbit, their breathing calm and steady. Sejin slept on a hanging bed, his face relaxed, a faint smile still lingering his mouth, even drooling slightly from the lingering taste of roasted locust. Only one person was still awake. Theo. The golden cat rolled around restlessly, clutching his bloated stomach. He had eaten far too much and couldn't fall asleep no matter how hard he tried. "I need fresh air," he muttered. Quietly, he slipped out of the dimensional space. The moment Theo stepped into the swamp, a chilling presence crept closer. A shadow low to the ground, slick and frog-like, moved with terrifying silence. Before Theo could react, something yanked him backward. A rough jute sack dropped over his head. "MRRRO?" Theo screamed in panic, his voice high and shrill. The attacker dragged him through shallow water without hesitation. The creature revealed itself a stealthy frog-like monster, furious and shaking with rage. It accused Theo of being responsible for releasing the purple locusts into Navia Swamp, claiming that countless comrades had died because of him. Theo tried to protest, utterly confused, but the frog refused to listen. "This starts with you," the creature snarled. "The rest will follow." Theo sobbed loudly, begging the frog to stop. Through tears, he introduced himself dramatically as a mid-level wandering merchant, the Golden Cat Theo. The frog scoffed. A wandering merchant would never come this deep into a death zone. Before things escalated further, another frog stepped in and told the captor to check Theo's neck. When they pulled the sack slightly aside, they saw it. A silver wandering merchant badge. The frog froze. Theo collapsed onto the ground, trembling violently, his body shaking uncontrollably from fear. The three frogs, blue, light green, and dark green, exchanged uneasy glances. Why would a wandering merchant be near the swamp? One suggested the badge could be fake. Theo immediately panicked, explaining everything in a rushed blur. They had come to eliminate the purple locusts, to save the jewel frogs, to stop the massacre. Then he dropped the biggest name he could think of. He claimed he was a subordinate of the tower administrator, the Black Dragon. He demanded they release him immediately. The frogs hesitated. If the Black Dragon truly was involved, Theo nervously suggested they knock on the nearby dimensional gate. The Black Dragon was sleeping inside. Proof enough. But just imagining waking such a being terrified them even more. The frogs debated fiercely. Finally, one frog came up with an idea. They would take Theo to Lord Geron. Before Theo could ask who that was, they tied him tightly to a long bamboo pole. Two frogs lifted the pole onto their shoulders and began marching away. Theo screamed with all his might, calling out for Sejan to save him. Inside the dimensional space, Sejan scratched his ear in his sleep, mistaking the distant cries for insects. Outside, Theo kept yelling until the frogs slammed him against a rock in frustration. "Fake merchants are always loud," one muttered. After things calmed down, the green frog apologized, explaining they had lost too many comrades recently. Only then did Theo realize the horrifying truth. The ones who kidnapped him were the jewel frogs they had come to save. Furious, Theo exploded, scolding them for treating the great wandering merchant like a criminal after everything he had done. But his rant was abruptly cut off. A deep, thunderous voice echoed through the swamp. "How dare you shout so loudly?" The water churned violently. Bubbles burst from the murky depths as an enormous silhouette slowly emerged. A giant jewel frog rose from the swamp. The pressure alone made the smaller frogs collapse to their knees. "Lord Geron," they whispered in fear. The jewel frog king towered above them, his presence overwhelming. Furious, he accused Theo of harming the swamp and its people. The water surged violently, slamming Theo and knocking him unconscious. Barely awake, Theo heard the blue frog explain that the cat had been found in the most toxic area of the swamp. Lord Geron assumed Theo was responsible for the locust outbreak. Theo's body screamed in pain. Fear paralyzed him. But then, something ignited inside him. This was the old Theo. He forced himself upright, standing proudly despite trembling legs. This body belongs to the mid-level wandering merchant, the Golden Cat Theo. He accused Lord Geron of kidnapping and threatening him without proof, declaring that such disrespect would be repaid. To the king, it was laughable. Lord Geron raised his massive hand, prepared to crush the insolent cat. But the dark green jewel frog stopped him. "My lord," he said carefully, "this cat claims to serve the Black Dragon. That could be useful." Lord Geron hesitated. If that was true, this situation was dangerous. The three frogs quickly explained that Theo claimed to fight purple locusts creatures even the jewel frogs couldn't handle. Perhaps He had come to help. Theo clenched his fists in irritation. Then he acted. Reaching into his bag, he pulled out a beautifully roasted piece of purple locust meat. "If you doubt me," Theo said confidently, "eat this." Before anyone could stop him, Lord Geron's massive tongue shot forward and swallowed it whole. The subordinates panicked. Their king had eaten poisoned meat. But then, light burst from Lord Geron's body. Rainbow-colored energy enveloped him as blissful sounds escaped his throat. When the glow faded, the king looked reborn, his jewel shining brilliantly, his body lighter, his presence transformed. "That was incredible," Lord Geron said, his voice filled with delight. The moment Lord Geron recovered, the swamp itself seemed to breathe again. Energy pulsed through the Jewel Frog King's massive body as he straightened proudly, the multicolored gem atop his head glowing with renewed brilliance. Gone was the sluggish heaviness caused by poison. Now he felt lighter than ever. "What you fed me," Geron said, staring at Theo in amazement. "It erased every toxin in my body." Theo gave a sly grin. He had expected that reaction. Without hesitation, the two struck a deal. And the timing couldn't have been better. Not far away, the lizard men were fighting a losing battle. Purple locusts swarmed endlessly, their blades slicing through the air as the lizard warriors cut them down with expert swordplay. But the moment the poisonous residue touched their skin, panic spread. The toxins were overwhelming, turning every wound into a death sentence. The swarm grew denser. The leader of the guard, Tamarau, clenched his weapon tightly. Their supply of detoxifying green onions was almost gone, and despair crept into every soldier's heart. The purple swamp inched closer. Just a little more, and it would be over. Then, a massive tongue slammed down from the sky. Dozens of purple locusts vanished in an instant, swallowed whole. A thunderous burp echoed across the battlefield. "Delicious," a deep voice rumbled. The lizard men froze. Hovering above them was an enormous jewel frog, its body radiating power. It was Lord Geron. Shock rippled through the lizard ranks as they watched him devour the locusts effortlessly without suffering any poisoning at all. Then Geron unleashed his true strength. Spinning his tongue at terrifying speed, he swept through the swarm like a living storm, gulping down thousands upon thousands of locusts without pause. The lizard men stared in disbelief. Who, or what, was this monster? The jewel atop Geron's head gleamed brightly as he finally spoke. "I am Lord Geron," he declared, "King of the Jewel Frogs, Master of Navia Swamp." Standing proudly atop his head was a small golden cat. Theo raised his paw dramatically. "I'm Theo," he announced, "mid-level wandering merchant, subordinate of the Black Dragon." Only then did the truth become clear. Theo had formed a contract with the Jewel Frog King. And now, Geron was single-handedly dismantling the locust disaster. Though some jewel frogs worried about their king consuming so much poison, none dared object. Theo had saved Geron's life. The scene shifted again. Theo sat confidently atop Geron's head, issuing orders like a seasoned commander. "Eat everything," he declared. "Don't leave a single one behind." With a delighted roar, Geron leaped straight into the heart of the swarm. Back inside the dimensional space, Sejin slowly stirred awake. He stretched, blinking groggily, then frowned. "Theo?" he muttered. The golden cat was nowhere to be seen. Concern flashed across his face. Before anyone could react, a powerful tremor shook the ground outside. The dimensional gate burst open. A massive shadow leapt overhead. The swamp erupted as an enormous body crashed down, soaking everyone in muddy water. Screams filled the air. Then silence. Clinging desperately to the giant frog was a familiar figure. Theo waved smugly. "Did you miss me?" Sejin rushed forward immediately. "Are you okay?" Theo puffed out his chest. "Perfectly fine. I even recruited a new subordinate. Sejin blinked. A what? Theo gestured grandly. Lord Jaren. At that moment, the Jewel Frog King noticed the mark on Sejin's hand, the unmistakable crest of the Black Dragon. Without hesitation, Jaron and the surrounding Jewel Frogs bowed deeply. They thanked Sejin, explaining that his cooking had saved their king and given them the strength to fight back. Sejin stared, stunned. Iona stepped forward, explaining that these were Jewel Frogs, the very species they had come to protect. And the one bowing before him was their king. Theo sat proudly atop Jaron's head, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. Iona couldn't believe it. Theo had subdued a being of this caliber on his own. She stared at him with newfound respect. Theo, however, had only one concern. He tugged at Sejin's pants leg. Did I do a good job? Sejin hesitated, still processing everything, but nodded. Theo immediately brightened. Then I want treats and churros. Sejin sighed and reopened the dimensional gate, telling everyone they'd talk inside. As they turned back, Jaron hesitated, staring at the small entrance. Sejin apologized it was too narrow for such a massive body. Jaron smiled calmly. No need to worry. The jewel on his head flared with light. The glow intensified until everyone shielded their eyes. When it faded, the massive king had transformed into a tiny, round frog, smaller than even the others. Sejin gaped. You can shrink? Jaron chuckled. It's nothing special. Iona immediately rushed forward, fascinated. Back inside the dimensional space, warmth returned. Iona scolded Theo furiously, demanding to know if he understood how worried she'd been. Theo nodded innocently, wisely omitting the kidnapping part. Nearby, the upgraded fireplace crackled as a massive stew bubbled. Purple Chef's potato stew. Thin slices of purple locust meat, detoxifying green onions, and strength potatoes simmered together. Effect: +10. 5 strength for 30 minutes. Fullness for 4 hours. Low-level poison resistance. Everyone lined up eagerly. The warrior rabbit sighed in satisfaction after eating. The jewel frogs stared in awe normally. Touching locusts would melt their skin, yet now they could eat them safely. Jaron laughed happily. This is exactly what I'd expect from the Black Dragon. Strength restored, Sejin encouraged everyone to prepare for the final extermination. But the jewel frogs felt conflicted. Victory meant no more stew. Sejin smiled knowingly. There's something I haven't shown you yet. He led them to a wooden door. Inside, a massive freezer packed with frozen purple locusts. Quang sneezed violently. Iona explained she'd preserved them for research, but gave Sejin permission to cook them. The jewel frogs stared in wonder. Cold storage was a completely new concept to them. As temperatures dropped, Jaron yawned and slowly drifted into hibernation. Seeing this, Sejin smiled. A new idea had just formed. High above the chaos of the lower floors, Dragon Lady Aylin remained buried beneath towering stacks of books inside the Administrator Tower. Scrolls floated around her, pages flipping rapidly as she searched relentlessly for an answer. Her expression was tense. Until Sejin returned safely, she knew she couldn't rest. Sending him down as a mid-level manager without proper authority had nearly cost everything. She needed to fix that mistake before it happened again. Book after book passed through her hands. Then, her eyes widened. A faint blue glow shimmered across the page she'd just opened. The text itself pulsed with magic. This is it. Aylin hugged the book tightly to her chest, relief washing over her. At last, she had found the solution. Confident now, she believed Sejin would return safely and stronger than ever. Back on the 67th floor, the lizard men and wolf tribe guards finished evacuating the wounded. The air felt lighter. For the first time in days, no locust presence could be sensed nearby. Some warriors dared to hope the battle was finally over. But Tamirao raised his hand. "Not yet," he said firmly. "Theo and Lord Geron went ahead of us. If they're still fighting, we can't abandon them." The soldiers nodded in agreement. With renewed determination, they marched toward Navia Swamp. What they found left them speechless. There was no battlefield. Instead, Quang and the other monsters were calmly planting detoxifying green onions and bladed green onions across the swamp. Sejun and Theo supervised closely, offering guidance on spacing and soil placement. The lizard men stared in confusion. Iona noticed them and waved happily. They had arrived at the perfect time. Tamirao nearly dropped his weapon when he realized the head of the Wizard Association was farming. Sejun explained calmly that they were ending the locust crisis permanently. Thanks to the Black Dragon's guidance, the swamp would no longer support the locusts. As he spoke, his eyes glowed faintly, a quiet authority radiating from him. Theo, still confused, asked why they were cutting and replanting green onions everywhere. Sejun explained patiently green onions required well-drained soil. Too much moisture would ruin them. With his plantation skill now at level 5, Sejun could clearly see which areas were suitable for planting. In this moment, the skill proved more valuable than ever. Soon, even the lizard men joined in, planting alongside the jewel frogs. Sejun believed that once finished, the swamp itself would suppress future infestations. From the beginning, his goal had never been glory, only to save the jewel frogs from extinction. Suddenly, a system notification appeared. At the same time, the warrior rabbit stiffened. "They're coming," he warned. Another massive swarm of purple locusts surged toward them at terrifying speed. For a brief moment, panic flickered. Then calm returned. Sejun was here. He ordered everyone to chew detoxifying green onions and arm themselves with bladed green onions. Quang groaned in disgust. "They're still ugly." But he raised his weapon anyway. The battle began. Iona's lightning tore through the sky, turning locusts into explosive sparks. Quang smashed enemies from the air. The warrior rabbit and lizard men fought with everything they had. At the center stood Sejun, dual-wielding his weapons, carving through the swarm with relentless precision. Theo released Lord Geron. The Jewel Frog King's jewel flared brilliantly as his body expanded once more. With a hungry roar, Geron leapt forward, swinging his tongue like a storm and devouring locusts by the thousands. Even Sejun and the princess stared in disbelief. Inspired, the smaller jewel frogs joined in. The locusts were no longer poisonous. Tamirao suddenly noticed something strange. The locusts were changing color. Purple, fading back to red. Relief surged through him. A system message confirmed it. As the population decreased, the locusts were degenerating to their original form. Hope returned. Sejun shouted encouragement, and everyone attacked with renewed strength. At last, silence. Theo exhaled deeply. They had won. No one was injured. Even Lord Geron let out a satisfied burp. The jewel frogs bowed deeply, thanking Sejun for saving them. They vowed to cultivate green onions themselves and protect Navia Swamp. A system notification appeared. Mid-level manager quest complete. 3 million exp. 50,000 tower coins. Sejun stared in disbelief. Nearly a year. Finally complete. Tamirao stepped forward, confessing his role in trusting Terk the pig, who had secretly fueled the locust disaster. He offered the reward box Terk had given him. Sejun refused. "Use it to rebuild the 67th floor," he said. Moved, the warriors bowed deeply. Moments later, blue light surrounded Sejun and the others. They were returning. The 99th floor. Fresh air filled Sejun's lungs as emotion swelled in his chest. the rabbits and wolves rushed toward him, overjoyed. He knelt, greeting everyone warmly. Theo suddenly noticed something strange. Lord Geron had followed them. Meanwhile, Sigyn checked on Bat-Bat, relieved to see him thriving. The fields were flourishing new crops, thriving soil. The architect rabbits beckoned him excitedly. They led him to the cave below the floor. A new staircase had been built. Candles lit the way. From now on, entry would be easy. Sigyn felt deeply grateful. He noticed new purifying ants Pasaki had multiplied. Good news for the flaming tree. Then, a system message. Aylin had noticed his return. Sigyn greeted her cheerfully, but she looked both relieved and irritated. She opened a glowing blue book and began channeling magic. "This is your reward," she said. Blue light enveloped Sigyn. Authority granted, unbreakable body. His physical form could no longer break. Quang tested it immediately. The strike landed. Sigyn didn't break. But he cried anyway. "It still hurts." Aylin smiled softly. Another quest appeared. Harvest 100,000 times. Completing it promised generous rewards reaching level 51, earning 50,000 tower coins, and boosting every tower farmer job skill by 1 level. But the sheer number alone made it obvious this challenge would be anything but easy. The story shifts, where Greed stood silently, admiring an old portrait of himself with unsettling pride. His self-absorption was interrupted when a soldier hurried in with urgent news. After receiving permission to speak, the messenger reported that the Wandering Merchant Association had officially summoned Greed. The situation had escalated quickly. Terk the overweight pig had been captured after failing to abduct the bunny princess. During questioning, Terk foolishly dropped Greed's name, instantly making him a suspect. Rage flashed in Greed's eyes as murderous intent surged within him. He couldn't believe how incompetent Terk had been. Greed had treated Terk generously. As a fellow Boar elder, he'd trusted him enough to hand over an important relic for the mission. Now, because of Terk's blunder, the very merchant association Greed secretly funded dared to investigate him. Suppressing his anger, Greed questioned the messenger about whether any solid proof existed. The reply was grim. Evidence had already been collected during a joint operation led by Iona, head of the Magic Association, alongside the Inspection Bureau under Inspector Fox. A flashback unfolds. Inspector Fox is shown arresting Terk under 8 major charges: kidnapping, illegal confinement, extortion, and more. Using a recording artifact, the authorities extracted a full confession. Terk's crimes were laid bare. He admitted to feeding the red locusts, planning to destroy the food supply so the 67th floor would inevitably fall under Lord Greed's control. Back in the present, Greed shredded the summon without hesitation. He dismissed the messenger coldly and returned to staring at his portrait, still unable to accept that the Merchant Association had forced his hand. This meant he'd have to intervene personally. From a nearby shelf, Greed removed a black book he had never once opened. It wasn't a book at all, it was a key. The bookshelf shifted aside, revealing a hidden passage. Greed descended deep underground until he reached a colossal gate marked with a golden bow emblem. Beyond it stood a white dragon statue, surrounded by towering piles of gold. The scene exposed the true depth of Greed's obsession. Suddenly, the statue spoke. Greed instantly dropped to his knees, bowing before the great white dragon speaking through it. Crimson light flared in the dragon's eyes as it stared down at him. The story jumps back to the 99th floor cave. Rabbit farmers were busy harvesting cherry tomatoes, while others alongside ants tended the flame tree and its young shoots. Baby Bear helped carry water from the nearby lake as young rabbits gazed at him with admiration. The bunny princess was showered with generosity, receiving baskets filled with freshly harvested crops from the architect rabbits. Amid the cheerful scene, Sigyn could be heard quietly counting to himself. The view shifts again. Sigyn, Theo, and the black rabbit were tugging at something stubbornly rooted in the soil. No matter how hard they pulled, it wouldn't budge. A thick red vine with countless leaves remained firmly anchored. Sijin quickly realized this was no ordinary plant. Even Theo, experienced as he was, had never seen a sweet potato vine of this size. Whatever lay underground had to be enormous. The moment giant sweet potato was mentioned, Baby Bear's eyes sparkled. Power surged through him as his body grew larger and larger. Gripping the vine, he pulled with everything he had. Sejin and Theo stepped back, cheering him on at the top of their lungs. With a powerful roar, Baby Bear strained until the ground finally gave way. As the massive sweet potato emerged inch by inch, Sejin and Theo exaggerated their shock and disbelief. Once it was fully freed, Baby Bear shrank back to his normal size. A system notification appeared. The crop was identified as a giant pumpkin sweet potato grown within the tower. It was delicious thanks to abundant nutrients, but those nutrients had been entirely consumed by its growth. Eating it granted no buffs, and it couldn't be replanted. It was classified as a grade C crop with a lifespan of 45 days. Everyone climbed over it in amazement. Even Sijin admitted its sheer size was unbelievable. One potato alone could feed them all. Baby Bear immediately begged to eat it on the spot. However, Sejin glanced at his mission progress. He'd only activated the harvesting skill around 3,000 times. With 100,000 required, the road ahead still felt endless. Still, seeing the joyful faces around him, Sijin smiled and announced they'd eat first. Baby Bear had earned it, and even the earlier punishment was officially revoked. Dinner was back on the table, and smiles spread everywhere. Sejin pulled out the dimensional space key and opened a gate directly into the 99th floor cave. He instructed Baby Bear to retrieve 10 purple locusts. The bear eagerly complied. The wolf chief stared in confusion, while the rabbits recoiled in disgust. Sejin quickly reassured them, explaining that appearances were deceiving. The locusts were incredibly tasty. Skepticism filled their eyes. Soon, purple locust sweet potato soup was simmering once more. Sejin tasted it repeatedly, fine-tuning the seasoning. The mother rabbit watched nervously, unsettled by its strange look. But Sejin was confident the giant sweet potato had added just the right sweetness, enriching the flavor perfectly. He handed the first bowl to the artist rabbit. No one moved. Even the mother rabbit trembled. Then, without hesitation, the chubby rabbit stepped forward, grabbed the bowl, and devoured it in seconds. His blissful expression said everything. When Sejin offered seconds, the rabbit sprinted back eagerly. Relief washed over everyone. Soon, even the mother rabbit and artist rabbit joined in, while the baby rabbits inhaled the mouth-watering aroma. The architect rabbit praised the stew endlessly as Sejin continued serving bowl after bowl. When Yona's turn came, she declined, as did the princess and the black warrior rabbit. Yona explained they had urgent matters. The trial of Greed, ruler of the 55th floor, was about to begin. Justice would finally be served. Sijin felt reassured knowing the black warrior rabbit was with them. At that moment, Lord Garen returned, calling out to Theo. He revealed he'd discovered something strange on the 99th floor. Outside, everyone stared skyward as a massive shadow loomed overhead. It wasn't a monster, it was another gigantic crop. Leaves the size of sails fanned the air. Theo immediately recognized it as a giant carrot. Even Baby Bear froze, overwhelmed. As Sejin debated how to harvest it, Theo calmly assured everyone. He instructed Jaren to transform. The Jewel Frog King grew to massive proportions and grabbed the carrot leaves, pulling with all his might. The ground shook violently, but the carrot didn't move. Before anyone could react, heavy footsteps echoed. Baby Bear's excitement exploded. The red mother bear had returned. Tension filled the air as the Frog King and Mother Bear locked eyes. Before a fight could break out, Baby Bear rushed between them, excitedly explaining the giant carrot and begging to eat it. Both creatures paused. Sejin seized the moment and proposed cooperation. Together, the strongest beings on the 99th floor might succeed where one could not. After hesitation, they agreed. They pulled with overwhelming force, triggering a massive earthquake. Slowly, impossibly, the carrot began to rise. It kept going and going until a golden carrot floated freely above the ground. A system alert appeared. Sejin had harvested the Red Ribbon's giant carrot altar. His job experience skyrocketed, harvesting proficiency increased, and he gained 10,000 experience points. Sejin was speechless. What exactly was a giant carrot altar? As the message finished, the father rabbit and the yellow rabbit children rushed over. Before Sejin could even ask a question, another system window appeared. It instructed him to offer 100 crops of 10 different types to the altar within 24 hours and to host the Harvest Festival of Abundance. Completing the festival would reward him with a new job skill, Crop Gigantic. Sejin could hardly believe it. A special quest tied to a floating carrot, and now he had to organize an entire festival to complete it. Nearby, the Jewel Frog King poked the carrot cautiously, still baffled by its existence. That's when the father rabbit stepped forward and explained everything. He revealed that this was the legendary golden carrot altar passed down through stories of the Red Ribbon Kingdom. According to Black Tower legends, a massive golden carrot once emerged from the ground, sparking conflict among the rabbits over ownership. During the chaos, one great rabbit called for peace and shared his food in front of the carrot. Moved by his kindness, the others followed, offering their own food as well. What began as conflict turned into celebration, a gathering that would later be known as the Harvest Festival of Abundance. Still, one question lingered in Sejin's mind. Why would a legendary carrot from the Red Ribbon Kingdom appear on the 99th floor? And in Baby Bear's mind, there was an even bigger mystery: the carrot wasn't gold at all. In the end, Sejin decided there was no point overthinking it. The system had given clear instructions. He would follow them, open the ribbon on the carrot, and host the festival. The scene shifts as Sejin carefully counts the crops he currently has: carrots, cherry tomatoes, pumpkin sweet potatoes, corn, regular potatoes, and green onions. He set aside 100 of each, wondering if that would be enough. Something felt off. He was certain they had planted more types than that. The farmer rabbit confirmed his suspicion and asked Sejin to follow him, explaining that the farm had expanded while Sejin was away. The next scene reveals rows of juicy strawberries and even chili peppers, crops they had never eaten before. Sejin was shocked. He remembered buying those seeds long ago alongside the carrots. Baby Bear started drooling instantly. He had never tasted them, but his instincts screamed that they would be delicious. Sejin finally understood how hard the father rabbit had worked while he was away on the 67th floor. Thanks to him, they now had 2 additional crops for the altar. Then the rabbit smiled and revealed there was actually one more. Sejin turned in surprise as the rabbit showed him peanuts. Sejin's excitement doubled. He couldn't believe they were already harvest ready. That's when it clicked. The mysterious stone monument. The rabbit confirmed it. The monument had dramatically accelerated crop growth. Sejin realized he needed to keep a closer eye on the farm from now on. He thanked the rabbits sincerely for their hard work. As everyone shared strawberries with Baby Bear, Sejin reviewed the list. Carrots, cherry tomatoes, pumpkin sweet potatoes, corn, potatoes, green onions, strawberries, chili peppers, peanuts. 9 types. He was still missing one. As Baby Bear stuffed strawberries into his mouth, Sejin frowned. This was a serious problem. Then Theo suddenly remembered something. He told Sejin there was one more crop. Theo reminded him of the yellow fruit they had planted after defeating the Frog Queen on the 75th floor. Baby Bear called it Pine's Horn, but Sejin corrected him: it was a pineapple. However, the problem remained. They had planted very few pineapples, and they were still young. Harvesting 100 in time seemed impossible. By the time enough pineapples matured, the other crops would rot. and with the seed shop still closed, Sejin had no easy solution. Still, he knew one thing worrying wouldn't help. So Sejin made a decision. He would harvest non-stop for now. As Theo and the others cheered him on, everyone knew an overwhelming amount of work lay ahead. The scene shifts once more to the Merchant Association, inside the Merchant Passage Central Court. An owl judge called the defendant forward. It was Greed. The judge announced that the Locust disaster on the 67th floor had been intentionally orchestrated by Greed and his subordinates. He was also charged with ordering the kidnapping of Magic Association President Iona and Princess Boo Boo of the Red Ribbon Kingdom. On top of that, Greed faced accusations of treason, releasing locusts on the 55th floor passage, launching an attack against the Red Ribbon Kingdom, assassinating the king and queen, and attempting to seize the throne. After listing every charge, the owl judge slammed his hammer down, officially declaring the trial underway. Yet despite hearing his name tied to every crime, Greed merely smiled a cold, twisted grin, completely unfazed by what was about to unfold. Sejin stood quietly in the middle of a vast strawberry field, moving at an unhurried pace as he carefully picked ripe strawberries one by one. The air around him was calm, filled with the faint sweetness of the fruit and the soft rustling of leaves beneath his feet. As he worked, a translucent system window suddenly materialized before his eyes. The notification identified the strawberry in his hand as a lucky strawberry, a fruit cultivated within the tower and fully saturated with rich nutrients. Thanks to the farmer's refined skill, its flavor and overall quality had significantly improved. The description noted that consuming it would increase the eater's luck for 1 hour. It was categorized as a grade C crop and had a remaining shelf life of 90 days. Sejin glanced down at the strawberries resting in his palms and let out a faint, satisfied smile. Turning his head slightly, he noticed several small white rabbits hopping energetically around the field. They moved with surprising diligence, gathering strawberries and placing them into neat piles as if this were the most natural task in the world. Watching them work so earnestly brought another smile to Sejin's face. A short while later, he crouched down and pulled a chili pepper from the soil. Almost immediately, another system notification appeared. This one labeled the crop as a calmness chili pepper, a tower-grown plant that had also absorbed nutrients to perfection. The description explained that eating it would calm the consumer's mind for 1 hour. Like the strawberries, it was a grade C crop with a 90-day expiration period. Seeing the notification, Sejin felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. With this ingredient available, he realized he could now prepare spicy dishes as well. With renewed motivation, he moved to the opposite side of the field and continued harvesting chili peppers. Suddenly, his eyes widened. The Queuing, who had been wandering nearby, was holding one of the chili peppers and lifting it toward his mouth. Sejin reacted instinctively, but it was already too late. The Queuing swallowed the pepper without hesitation. For a brief moment, nothing happened. Then, seconds later, the effect took hold. Flames burst from the Queuing's mouth as it let out a piercing scream of pain. Sejin froze in shock at the unexpected sight, his body stiff with alarm. Quickly regaining his composure, he rushed over and reassured the panicking Queuing, knowing that the effects would be temporary. Just as he said, the intense burning sensation subsided after a few seconds. The flames vanished, and the Queuing calmed down, left only panting and teary-eyed. Once the situation was fully under control, Sejin let out a quiet breath of relief and returned to his work. He gathered the freshly harvested strawberries and carefully placed them in a designated area, arranging them with precision. As he worked, he mentally calculated the numbers and concluded that collecting 100 of each crop type would be sufficient. The others soon joined in to help, and before long, all the harvested crops were neatly lined up in front of the towering golden carrot altar. Sejin counted them carefully and confirmed that 9 different types of crops had been prepared. At that moment, a new system notification appeared. It was a job-related quest tied to harvesting. requiring the use of the harvest skill 100,000 times. The system displayed his current progress over 11,000 uses, confirming that he had already passed the 10,000 threshold. He paused briefly, contemplating what should be done about the final remaining crop. Standing nearby, Theo casually pointed out that only pineapples had yet to be harvested. Sejin started to think for a moment. I had only planted 20 pineapple plants. Sejin and his cute friend go near the pineapple fields and see that the pineapples are still very unripe. Sejin goes forward to harvest one of the pineapples, and then one of his skills, Growth Promoter Level 1, is activated. When Sejin picks up the pineapple, it starts to glow with a golden light, and then a notification appears that says, "You have picked up a raw pineapple. Job experience has increased slightly. You have gained 30 exp." Sejin is holding the pineapple in his hand and looking at it, and it seems like he's about to harvest it very soon. Sejin absolutely hates picking unripe pineapples. It makes him feel terrible. Then Theo, watching from the side with a mischievous glint in his eyes, said lightly, "Then can't you just give us the unripe ones?" Queuing, as usual, was already chewing on something and nodded enthusiastically. Sejin slowly lifted his head. "President Theo," he said gravely. The air suddenly grew serious. He paused, then continued in a deep, resolute voice. "As a tower farmer, my self-respect will not allow me to do such a thing." Theo and Queuing froze. A moment later, both of them looked at Sejin with shining eyes, deeply impressed. Sejin rested his chin on his hands and sank into thought once more. But still, shouldn't sharp-bladed green onions and detoxifying green onions be considered completely different crops? Theo frowned. This really isn't good at all. Just then, 3 ants arrive there, whose names are Passak 1, Passak 2, and Passak 3. He calls out to them in a very cute way. Then Sejin noticed something lying around those ants, and it was none other than the seed of the purified ant. Sejin bends down, picks up one of the seeds, and shows it to one of the ants, saying, "Are you telling me to offer these on the altar? Are you helping us?" The 3 ants become very happy and start shaking their entire bodies, causing many seeds to fall from their bodies. Sejin, overjoyed, collects all the seeds in a basket and takes them to the large golden carrot, where he arranges them. Almost immediately after, the White Rabbit stepped forward and formally dedicated the harvest to the golden carrot altar, offering heartfelt sincerity and requesting a blessing of abundance. Before the White Rabbit could continue speaking, the golden carrot suddenly began to glow with an intense brilliance. A powerful light burst forth, filling the area. Another system notification appeared, announcing that 100 units each of 107 crop types had been successfully offered. The quest was officially completed, and as a reward, the Festival of Abundant Harvest was activated. Sejin watched the radiant altar with quiet satisfaction, fully aware that their plan had succeeded. The White Rabbit confirmed it with visible excitement. Soon after, another notification followed, declaring that the giant carrot altar of the Red Ribbon was granting a great blessing upon the entire surrounding area. The golden light intensified further, becoming so bright that even Eileen's crystal ball began to shine in response. Elsewhere within the tower, Aelin, who had been reading in silence, lifted her head in shock, startled by the sudden surge of power. The glow spread across multiple floors, drawing the attention of countless beings. Among those who noticed were warriors of the Minotaur tribe. They halted mid-step, staring at the radiance in disbelief. Their king gazed toward the light with narrowed eyes, wondering what kind of phenomenon could generate such overwhelming brilliance. After a brief pause, he issued an order for everyone to prepare and move toward the source, remarking that it had been a long time since their last expedition. The scene abruptly shifted to the central court of the Merchant Passage. A verdict had just been announced, and the courtroom was plunged into stunned silence. Iona was the first to react, unable to hide her disbelief. Grid had been acquitted. Standing calmly across from her, Grid slowly began to smile. At that moment, a member of the police force seated beside the chief judge stood up and declared his intention to testify. He asserted that every incident leading up to this moment had been orchestrated by Grid himself. After listening carefully, the judge responded in an even tone, stating that there was no concrete evidence to support such an accusation. Just then, the fox stepped forward and produced a ring, proclaiming it to be undeniable proof. To strengthen his claim, he played a recorded confession from Tarek. In the recording, Tarek openly admitted to his crimes and explained that the plan involved deliberately cutting off food supplies to starve entire regions. Once chaos took hold, the land would inevitably fall under Lord Grid's control. When the recording ended, all eyes turned toward Grid. Grid remained composed. He acknowledged that the ring was indeed valid evidence, but calmly clarified that it only proved Tarek's guilt, not his own. He added that he had no idea why Tarek had mentioned his name at all. The fox exploded in anger, insisting that Grid had been the one issuing the orders. The judge then turned to Tarek directly and asked whether this accusation was true. Without hesitation, Tarek confessed that he had acted alone. He claimed that the entire scheme was designed to secure his position within the Boer Elder Council, and that framing Grid was part of his strategy. Before the tension could settle, Iona slammed her hands onto the table, loudly rejecting Tarek's confession. She declared that everyone knew they had all been working together. In response, Grid calmly redirected the accusation, stating that the entire situation had actually been orchestrated by Iona herself. The courtroom erupted in shock. Iona reacted with fury, vehemently denying the claim and calling it absurd. Grid, however, remained relaxed, even amused. He remarked that if he had recorded her making such statements, she would be the one standing trial instead. The princess beside Iona observed that Grid's unnerving calmness was suspicious. Iona tried to recover her composure, explaining that she had simply not expected events to unravel so openly. The atmosphere grew heavy as the judge prepared to conclude the proceedings. The verdict was delivered with formal authority. There was no evidence that conclusively proved the charges against Grid. At the same time, there was also no evidence that fully denied his connection to Tarek. As a result, the charge of instigating the crime was dismissed due to insufficient proof. However, until suspicions surrounding attempted harm toward Iona and Princess Pupu were completely cleared, Grid was forbidden from making contact with them. As the judgment echoed through the courtroom, Grid smiled faintly. Around him, the expressions of those present hardened, their eyes filled with anger and frustration as they stared at him in silence.